Hello, and welcome to the C-Suite Chronicles podcast. We're bringing you the top voices in tech leadership. Leading a startup can be a lonely endeavor, or so the story goes. But perhaps the story is self-perpetuating because it's true. So what's the solution? How do you combat that loneliness? How do you go out and build a community of your peers? How do you create a strong network of people you can collaborate and form meaningful, lasting relationships with? You've heard it before. You should network. You should work on building a community of people you know, like, and trust, and who know, like, and trust you. Go to your local trade association. Go to a chamber mixer. And sure, those are great places to meet and network with people. But the fundamental issue with networking is that most people are doing it wrong. They go into it thinking, what can I get out of this? Real networking is about cultivating genuine human connections. It's about asking the right questions in a conversation with the goal of discovering how you can help another person succeed. Whether you end up collaborating with them yourself or introducing them to someone else who can solve a challenge. It's about bringing people together so they can collaborate to solve challenges in their companies and in the communities where they live and work. Now, building a network in a community doesn't happen overnight, but with consistent action and commitment, the end result can be transformational. Thom Singer is the CEO of the Austin Technology Council and a renowned keynote speaker and author who's helped thousands of people learn how to build meaningful business relationships and leverage personal connections to achieve success. He's the host of the Making Waves at C-Level and Austin Tech Connect podcasts, and he's written 12 books on the power of business relationships, sales, networking, presentation skills, and entrepreneurship. Pankaj Sharma is Executive Vice President of Global Remittance Management at Remitly, a digital financial services company that facilitates international money transfers to more than 135 countries. Pankaj is passionate about helping people network in a way that's authentic, and he's doing some innovative work at Remitly to help employees there feel more engaged, connected, seen, and included. Stay tuned. If you want to learn how to network effectively and build a community for greater success, you won't want to miss this episode of the C-Suite Chronicles. Before we jump into today's topic, give us just a brief introduction and a background about who you are and what you do.
My name is Thom Singer. I'm the CEO of the Austin Technology Council in Austin, Texas. And I also spent a good decade or more as a professional speaker, speaking to organizations, associations, and companies about this power of human connection as we have moved to a world where everybody is digital. Everybody thinks that all their connections are just likes, links, shares, and follows. I've been speaking about how do we get back to the basics of real human relationships that lead us to more success as an individual, as a company, and then also as a community. And I put a lot of that to work in my role at the Austin Technology Council.
Great. Pankaj?
Yeah. So my name is Pankaj Sharma, and I'm the Executive Vice President at Remitly, heading their global remittance business management function. I'm based out of London. Just by way of introduction about Remitly, Remitly is a digital financial services company serving immigrants for their cross-border financial services need. And we have been in the business for more than 11 years now, serving millions of customers globally. And from my background, I was born and brought up in India, starting my career in consulting and moved to the UK about 10 years back. And I've been working at Remitly's London office for the last 5 years. And really excited about this topic. As Thom mentioned about how things have changed post-COVID and how we are sort of highlighting the fundamental importance of networking and building deeper connections, I think, which is such a critical topic. So excited to be here.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both for being on the show today. All right, well, let's jump in. The first question that I have is around this idea of building community and network. Obviously, you're both very passionate about this. And, Thom, you've built a career teaching other people how to do this. So I wondered if you could both just kind of give some insights on why building community and the strong network of your peers is so essential to personal, professional, and organizational success. And then as a second part of that question, how do trade associations in particular play an integral role in creating community for people such as CEOs, founders, and business leaders?
Yeah, so networking, in my opinion, is so crucial to open yourself up to different perspectives and allowing you to learn and refine your thesis around problems you're solving or the impact you want to have. And also as leaders, I think one thing that we might relate to is that it could become quite lonely at the top. And so having a strong support system of other leaders who you can have, conversations around common challenges that you face is so critical to ensure a sustainable growth. And different trade associations, really help in making these connections easier and building a community of leaders who are working towards creating an impact in various fields. And, for example, for myself, I'm connected to my, excellent network from my undergrad college and my postgrad business school, and in addition to my network of leaders, working within the cross-border payment space, where we discuss, what are the common challenges that exist, and how should we be working towards tackling those to have even more impact globally.
Yeah, and I would just jump in and say that, the old cliche, people do business with people who they know, they like, and they trust is actually true. And it's probably more true today than ever. And of course, cliches are all based in truth anyway. So when people go, oh, that's an old saying, well, but it's, if you really look around at who you choose to hang out with, who you choose to give business to, who you choose to share opportunities with, it's usually people who you've had some sort of a connection with so that they come top of mind. Because one of the problems in this digital world is we might be connected to 5,000, 10,000 people on LinkedIn, but if I don't know who you are and what you do, I won't think of you when an opportunity comes across the thing. So just having some sort of a digital link doesn't matter. Now, you often get pushback from people who go, oh, I hate networking. And I'm like, well, why? And they go, oh, it's the stale cheese and the cheap wine that they serve at these parties. I'm like, that's not networking. That's bad menu choices. But networking, the definition, if you really kind of pry into it, it's the creation of long-term and mutually beneficial relationships between two or more people where everyone involved in that relationship is going to find more success because of it than they would have had without it. And so when you really start looking at it that way, it's like, well, if I have long-term and meaningful relationships, I'm going to have more success. Maybe early on, you need to start investing in growing those relationships. You have to dig that well before you're thirsty, because if you get laid off or your company needs an introduction to somebody and you have avoided that human contact, it's really hard then to go and say, hey, I'm looking for a job. Can you help me? Or could you make an introduction to that CEO? Because I don't know who you are. And I can't just constantly be helping every stranger who reaches out. It doesn't work that way. We have limited bandwidths. So that's why I really believe that you have to go out, you have to invest in people, you have to care about people, you have to listen, you have to look for ways to serve your community. And then you're going to be the person who people look at and go, why is she so lucky? She gets so many opportunities. Well, it's not luck, it's set up. And to hit that second part of your question, why do trade associations matter? I think today in 2023, trade associations are more important than ever, because people are being sent home to work remotely. People are less engaged with people. Studies show that people have less friends than at any time in society. And so bringing people together who share something in common and letting them share experiences with each other through attending events, online and in person, etc., supporting causes that people can get behind, that's how we actually build relationships. And so I think the smartest people are getting involved with trade associations, and the smartest trade associations are realizing that their number one goal is fostering that human connection between experts in their field.
What are some common mistakes that people make when attempting to build or strengthen their network? And do you have any advice on how people can avoid these pitfalls?
Well, I think the biggest mistake that people make in this digital world is they send cold solicitation emails or direct messages in LinkedIn to people. Or last week, I received 14 in-mail, which means they pay to send me an in-mail because we're not connected. And they literally launched into, hey, we create websites. Hey, we do this. Hey, we do that. I don't go to LinkedIn to be sold to. It's not the reason I use that tool. Same thing with my email. I don't open up an email and say, oh, look, I've never heard from this person, and they're telling me that they're the best business coach in the world. I should hire them. That's not the way humans work. However, when you build a reputation, when you build a brand, when people are talking about you, when you're able to tell stories about who you are, what your organization is, that spreads, that's going to be when you actually will get opportunities. So thinking that throwing a ton of spaghetti against the wall and thinking you're networking by asking people to buy my stuff, it's not. That's one way. Networking is the creation, I said it before, of long-term and mutually beneficial relationships. So if you want a mutually beneficial relationship, you have to go into it saying, who can I help? So when I teach people networking and they're going to go to a conference, I'm working with a lawyer right now who's going to a really important conference. And he says he goes to these things and never comes home with a lot of real value. And so I said, how about going into the room instead of who can I get as a client or who can I get to refer me to a client? What if you went to this conference and said, my goal is to meet 5 people who I can absolutely help by introducing them to somebody or in some other way, help them go forward. So I said, the number one question you should ask people is, what's your biggest challenge in business and who is your ideal customer and how do you find them? Because if I meet you and I find out who's your ideal customer and how do you typically get introduced to those customers, I might be able to make an introduction. Now, not everybody you meet are you going to be able to help. However, if you go in with the intention of, who does my network know that can help this person thrive? People are going to want to start being in your orbit. And it takes more than going to one conference for 3 days looking for 5 people to help. Networking is not a verb. You don't go networking. It's a lifestyle. You have to choose to create things where you serve others. And I have people push back all the time and they go, well, I'm too busy in my career to help anybody else. It's all about me. How do I get the next job? How do I get my sales? How do I get this? And I'm like, great, the networking's not for you. Nobody wants to network with somebody who's like, don't have time for you, just need you to help me. That's not how you build a friendship. It's not how you build a business relationship. And it's not how you thrive over a 30 or 40-year career.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes people make when they're networking is when they reach out to a network or make an effort to network only when they need something, which is so opposite to the concept of making deeper and meaningful connections. And when they make a mistake of when people make a connection with the sole purpose of getting something from it, and it makes it very transactional. And nobody wants connections that are very transactional in that sense, right? When we even when we talk about in-person events, especially people who are introverts, they really find it difficult to make connections, and you'll find them spending time with people then they know, they're like eating with them and standing with them, and they find it difficult to make make a connection, and they try to the way for them to connect is like to exchange cards with as many people as they could, right? Which also doesn't help in making meaningful connections, because what you want is in order to make meaningful connections, and it's not just professional network, but in general in life, ultimately you want to be curious about what challenges somebody else is facing, and having the conversation around that, essentially, and that makes it less transactions and more sort of personal in that sense. And as I mentioned previously, like, focus on having 1 or 2 deeper conversations versus multiple. Sometimes I see, like, when people go into these in-person events where, because there's so much of pressure on them to network, to quote unquote networking, right? They will be even when they're talking to someone face to face, they're not listening, or they're not curious about, because they're already thinking about, hey, this is how much time I have for this event. I've already spent X minutes on this person, and I need to maximize my time and for this event, which is not true. Like, focus on just 1 or 2 people, and the focus should not be about what do you do. It should be about, hey, what is your biggest challenge, and sharing a story about around that. The other thing which is important, which Thom also mentioned, is fundamentally you have to be a giver, not a taker, and we have to think in that way, because focus on having a conversation immediately to say, hey, this is what I want, right? That should not be the purpose. I think purpose should be about, hey, here is how I can help, versus here's what I need from you. And I think these are very fundamental things, where goes back to the other aspect of, like, networking is not about when you need something in your network. it's an ongoing, as Tom mentioned, it's a lifestyle because it's an ongoing thing that you're doing. Because when you do ongoing networking and building relationships and connections, those deeper, meaningful connections, and that are ongoing, then when you actually need help, need advice, then you're not taking effort to network and somebody doesn't feel like, oh, this person is reaching out because this person needs something from me. They know that we have a meaningful, connection, and I should help somebody, right? And I think that's a very uh, deep understanding of connection building that needs to be understood. Avoid several pitfalls that people face when they are going for. I really like Tom mentioned like networking as a verb, essentially.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think, it's astounding to me, especially on LinkedIn, how many sales solicitations come in and people still think that's effective. It's shocking to me. I love that you both mentioned sort of as an icebreaker or sort of as making a connection with somebody to help get them to help you understand their challenges and what it is that they need and where they're looking for customers in their business or kind of what they're struggling with. I think that's really helpful because it's outward facing, right? And it shows that you care about them, you're investing in them versus, as you both said, what can you do for me? So I think that's really great. Thom, you have said on numerous occasions that this idea of community collaboration and conversations can solve problems in any industry. And I'm wondering if you could just share some insights on how these ideas can be applied to the tech industry specifically. I think there are a number of challenges facing our industry right now. And Pankaj, I'd love to have you weigh in on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially in the tech world where, how do you drive customer-centric solutions and you're actively making lives easier for your customers, and that can only happen when you are building a community with your customers actively. And I think that's a super critical. And for example, for my company itself, we continue to find ways in which you build stronger connections with your customers, not just through your service but outside as well, whether it's community events, whether it's about we have a scholar program where we support students in Philippines. So I think that's one aspect of it, because sometimes we forget about community with the customers, which is so essential. And then the second aspect of it is engaging in conversations with the community of leaders to solve common challenges. I think which is super critical, especially if I think from the context of my industry, like there are things that common challenges, especially when it comes to working with policymakers, right? How do you ensure the policy evolve with the customer preferences and overall landscape, and working together to, for example, making payments easier globally, right? And how do you work with the policymakers? And that is a shared problem that you work with different leaders of the community and work together to solve that problem, essentially. Another one which Tom can, I think, very well attest to is a common problem within the tech community we face about hiring good talent. And and especially in the post-COVID world, like how it's a big challenge, especially in the tech and in the engineering space, essentially. So there are like several shared problems or challenges that we face as a tech community, and I think having those conversations within your community with the leaders, I think goes a long way in terms of making sure that you're not alone, yourself as a business leader or yourself as a company, essentially solving or tackling these challenges, but you have overall community to tackle these challenges.
Yeah, I fully concur with what Pankaj just said, and I think that it's really interesting in the fact that I've made a career as a speaker on that side of my life, talking about this idea that community collaboration and conversations can solve all problems. And I have had the honor to be the keynote speaker at 1,200 events, either for associations across industry lines or inside companies. So this can be an outwardly focusing thing. So when I'm at an association, we talk about, how do you build these relationships, this community in your industry, and how do you collaborate with other people out in the industry? When I go into a company, we talk about this internally, the community being all of the employees. And in lines with what he just said about this hiring thing, when people have a sense of community, when they feel included in collaborating on projects, And when they get to have open conversations with their peers, with their superiors, with people who report to them, without any fears of repercussion, but really open conversations. There's no dumb answers, right? There's no dumb conversations. When people are able to do that, they stay at the company longer, they work harder, and they're more satisfied in their job. Well, if we look back at what's gone on the last 2 or 3 years with the Great Resignation and all these quiet quitters who are just doing the minimum until somebody figures it out and fires them, that neither of those things happen, right? You don't have people, screwing over, for lack of a better term, their coworkers by not doing the work if they have real friendships. Gallup has done a survey several times over the past 30 years that has shown that when people have real friends at work, they stay at the company longer. They're more committed. They work harder. So these are things that really matter to tech, because we, over the last couple of years, have said, go work from home. And because of the difficulty in finding employees, we have said, well, we're not going to hire in our geographic area. We can hire anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. The problem with that, and I am pro, remote work, I'm pro hybrid work. The problem is that when we first had the pandemic and everybody went home, people were saying, wow, our team is working great together using Zoom or Teams. It's all working out great. Fast forward now, almost 3 years later, and people are saying, wow, we're struggling having the team bonded, having the culture. Well, because the team already existed. So they were able to go remote. One company that I talked to has hired people now all over North America. And so they no longer can make everyone come to the office because they don't just live in their community. And all of the other CEOs tell the CEO, wow, look at all the money you're saving, not having to have all these desks. And he goes, I'm actually spending more money because in order to have community, 4 times a year, I have to fly everybody in to where the headquarters is and have a company meeting and then team meetings for the whole week. And he goes, and you fly in 150 people plus your local people, you put them up at the JW Marriott and you feed them and you do this and you bring in speakers. He goes, turns out it's not cheaper than having everybody come to the office. But if you don't bring them together, they don't bond. And if people don't have those connections, they're just going to move on when another opportunity comes around. So taking this to the macro, the big picture, this is true for all of us who work in and around tech. We need our communities to come together and have the hard conversations. A lot of cities like the one I live in, we have transportation issues. We have affordability issues. We have diversity issues. Those things won't solve themselves, and you can't wave a magic wand and solve them. You have to have people in the community who are forward thinking, who are visionary leaders, and who care beyond their own bottom line that they want to impact everything around them. When that happens, things will thrive. When people pull back and get into their own little silos and their own ivory towers and just thinking, oh, I'm so smart, I give a little money here, I do this, all of a sudden you end up with a fragmented community in your city, and a fragmented community can't drive forward. So this matters at the CEO level, it matters at the entry level, it matters inside the company, it matters outside the company, it matters in your community, and then it matters beyond your community. We have to have that sense of belonging, that sense of community. We have to get people to want to work together on not just on money-making causes for the company. When I say collaboration, people think that's all about 2 companies coming together and having a new product. Maybe that's awesome, but it might just be working together on transportation issues in your city. Your companies don't even do the same thing in tech. They're in totally different verticals, but the CEOs care about the same thing. So there's collaboration on solving a problem. And then, like I said, the more we can have conversations and people can feel heard, the more they feel connected. And we are suffering in a world where people are feeling disconnected. So we have to do something about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to that idea of the trade associations, right? I mean, Austin Technology Council, WTIA, bringing people together in their communities. And we do a lot of this work locally as well, bringing people together, broadening our networks, having these conversations to solve these really deep challenges. So well said. So on that note, networking and community building, these are powerful ways to forge key relationships and build successful companies. What are some of your top actionable tips for someone who wants to strengthen their network and build these kinds of relationships?
I think that, the answer is that it can't just be one person. It can't just be the CEO who says, I want to be involved in the community. I go out in my associate and I talk to CEOs. They go, I don't have time to serve on your board. Great. What about your COO? What about your CTO? What about your CFO? Is there somebody you need lower than that on the org chart who you want to groom to be, know about volunteering and being involved? It's not just one person. In fact, if you have a company, I do a lot of consulting for law firms on business development. So we'll just use that as an easy example. If you've got one tech lawyer who goes out and tries to go to every tech event in Washington, in Seattle, or in Austin, or in Boston, no one's going to know who he or she is, and no one's going to know who the firm is. But if you have 12, 3 partners and 7 associates who focus on tech companies, and you divide up the different organizations, Becky always goes to the Association for Corporate Growth. Ted always comes to the Austin Technology Council. Brian always goes to whatever group, and you give them each 1 or 2 associations, and you tell them you never miss anything this group does. Over time, everyone, because nobody goes to everything, but everybody goes to 2 or 3 things. They're like, oh my gosh, your firm is everywhere. How many people do you have? Like 30 people? It's just about being focused and not sending different people every month, but assigning people to how to get involved and having them go all the time. Meeting you once doesn't make you part of my network. It takes 7 to 10 interactions with people, not before we're even business friends, but before I even notice you exist. So you have to be seen, you have to participate, oftentimes for a year or so before you're ever going to start building the relationships that lead to opportunity. And most people, they go once or twice and they go, I didn't get any business, networking doesn't work. That's short-sighted, and it's undermining your company being able to raise its profile and be able to thrive. But you can't rely on one person. You got to get the whole, it has to be a lifestyle. It has to be part of the culture for the whole company.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to jump in here and draw an interesting parallel. You mentioned that it takes sort of 7 to 10 impressions. I think, it's almost like marketing in a sense, right? Or branding yourself. Somebody has to have those repeated interactions with you to really get to know you and trust you and like you, kind of getting back to this whole broad idea of networking. So
I would say it's not like marketing. I would say networking is marketing. And the product you're marketing is yourself and your commitment to the greater community, whatever that means. And so it is just like marketing. And marketing people know that it takes repetition, and it takes time, and it takes a brand, and it takes consistency. And they also know that trust that you build for your company, or in this case, for an individual, can also be destroyed really quickly if someone screws up. So you not only have to go out and build your reputation for yourself and your firm, you have to protect it. When I was the marketing director for a big law firm, people said, what do you do? I said, my job is to protect and promote the image of the law firm every single day. The lawyer's job is to go practice great law. Well, that's true for yourself. If you're building your network, you need to go out and protect and promote your image in the community. You got to remember, you got to protect it too. You can't screw up. You can't treat people poorly. You can't yell at a waiter when you're in a restaurant, because you could undermine and burn down that trust that you've built really fast.
I love that. I love that analogy with marketing, and specifically brand marketing. I think that's where it comes out to be. And going back to Robin, your question around some actionable tips, I think firstly, I would say, like, identify your personal gaps and gaps within the organization, right? And be honest about them, and then use your existing network or resources available, like LinkedIn, to find connections who have strengths in those areas and where you need to grow. And don't be afraid to reach out and ask for introduction, right? So that's like very actionable tip of, like, first of all, explore yourself. Like, where do you need help, right? Sometimes people reach out and they don't even know what help do they need, right? Be specific around that. And then I would say, like, secondly, it should be a two-way street, like which we mentioned in the previous segment as well. Like, anytime you meet someone new, be generous with your time and knowledge, right? And try to leave every conversation by offering to be a resource that somebody can, if they ever need support in the future, they can reach out to you. So it goes back to the point of, like, you should be a giver, not just a taker, in that sense, right? And then finally, when it comes to networking, I mean, I fully recognize it doesn't come naturally to everyone, right? Just like not everyone does the marketing effectively, right? It doesn't come naturally to everyone. So in that sense, it can require us to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? And I'd say, like, one actionable tip would be that say yes to something that scares you. Everyone, one thing that scares you, say yes to that, and then the progress that you can make, when you are networking with people. Ultimately, having uh, don't think about, hey, I need to network with somebody, and be comfortable with actually sharing, a purpose with them and sharing a story with them and understanding like, so in my opinion, if you are curious, and I feel like most people are curious, right? Human that's what makes us human in that sense, right? If you are curious, you can actually build deeper connections and networks. And so one actionable tip, if I had to summarize all of that, would be, I would say, be curious, and and ultimately share with people with the purpose of giving, rather than taking.
Well, switching gears a bit here, there's a lot of discussion about this idea that recession is on the horizon if we aren't already there. What are your thoughts on how company leaders should focus, or what should they focus on really to give their businesses the best chance of survival in the event of an economic downturn?
Yeah, I can I can kick it off. So I think, whenever there are talks about downturn or recession, ultimately, I do feel like, the companies or business leader, everybody should be really thinking about the fundamentals, right? And when I think about the fundamentals, there are three aspects that I think about it. One is customers, the second is people and culture, and the third is, just the unit economics. And I can go deeper into all these three aspects of it. So when I look at, customers, the businesses that are built on, and scale keeping the customer in mind will always succeed, whether there's a downturn or good times or bad times. Businesses that are focused on solving fundamental customer problems and are very customer centric and thinking with the customer in mind will always win, in that term. So I think, which means that ultimately in the downturn, it's even more important that you go back and connect with your customer, and make sure that the customer experience is paramount, and you're building the businesses, by building trust with them, right? So that's number one. The second one, I would say, people and culture, like the term that we have heard of, like culture eats strategy for breakfast. Ultimately, that's again another fundamental point, like especially in downturn, making sure that your people are motivated and inspired towards a common mission and vision. And there's, healthy and inspiring culture of empathy, bias for action towards the right outcomes, customer centricity, which becomes so important, especially in the downturn, where you need to make sure that your people that you have, your employees, are motivated, inspired towards what matters, right? And then coming on to the third thing, which is fundamentals of running the business, essentially based on, sustainable unit economics. And when I say unit economics, it's about really thinking through, hey, how are we making, some of our investment decisions, and how they can be even more efficient. When we are thinking about marketing, like, are we really thinking about marketing, in an efficient manner? Are we really measuring the impact of what we are doing? How can we make each and every dollar that we spend even more efficient, in that respect? So now, all these things we should be doing, business as usual, even outside of whether it's a downturn. But businesses that actually focus on these fundamentals, they are more successful in the downturns than other businesses. Which means that even if the businesses are not focusing on these fundamentals, if there is a downturn, it's just super critical to focus on these business fundamentals, essentially.
Yeah. And I'll take that question to the individual, right? One of the problems that we see is during a recession, during a downturn, and we saw this, after the dot-com bust, we saw it after 9/11, we saw it in 2008, 9, 10, 11, even 12. This whole topic of networking becomes really popular. Then in boom times, it goes down. And I know this because I earned my living for over a decade speaking on this topic. And I started in 2008, 2009, and I was booked solid because people really cared about it. During boom times, people are like, that doesn't matter. If I need a job, I just raise my hand and I get hired. If a recession comes, and it's been a long time since we've had a real heavy one, and people are getting laid off, you're going to see all these people suddenly show up at all these Chamber of Commerce events, all these Association for Corporate Growth events, all these Austin technology events. Austin Technology Council events or Washington Technology Council events or wherever they are. And they're going to be running around like, oh, I have a resume here. Hey, I'm out of work. Well, where were you when the community needed your support during the good times? And this is a problem that we have is people and companies tend to show up when they're in need and they're like, help me. And nobody helps them because nobody knows who they are. Or if they do know who they are, they say, where have you been for the last 3 years when we were trying to, do stuff in this organization? So my answer is you have to go dig your well before you're thirsty. You have to build those relationships. Not everyone you meet is going to be part of your network. Not everyone you meet is going to be able to help you. However, if you go out there and build that brand, serve your community, be nice, help people, have an interest in what's important to them, as he said, be curious about what's important to them, what's going to happen is when you're in need, your phone is going to ring. People are going to be there to help you. You don't even have to raise your hand. If you build your network, if you treat people well, people are going to be like, oh, she's in need. How can I help her? If you ignore people, if you're a jerk, if you're invisible, when you're like, I'm in need, they're like, so are these 400 other people who just showed up for the first time. So you need to get involved now.
I want to talk a little bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's a diversity in hiring in particular is a challenge in the tech industry, as we all know, and DEI is at the core of our mission at the Washington Technology Industry Association. And we touched a little bit on this, I think, earlier today, but I want to talk about integrating equity and inclusion into an organization and how that requires giving people a sense that they belong, right? That sense that they feel seen and heard for who they are and that they're valued really for their experience. What advice do you have for company leaders who are seeking to build stronger communities and human connections within their organizations? Thom, I know you've talked a ton about this, both here and in other forums, and so I'll let you go first.
Well, I am by no means an expert in the world of DEI, but I will tell you that it definitely matters. Every study that's out there says that when your company is diverse, when the board of directors is diverse, when the set of employees is diverse, the company makes more money, is more profitable, et cetera. And so diversity brings with it, and it's not just race or gender. Diversity is everything. It's age, it's country of origin, it's what part of the US you grew up in. If we're looking at that, it's political views. So many people only want to hang out with people who will vote for 100% of the same candidates as them, but that's not the way we learn and grow, because I don't know about you, but I've been wrong before about political choices, about social choices, about things where later on in life I learn, oh my gosh, now it's time to grow and change. And I have some people who say, I've been right about everything. I've never had to grow and change. Then I think there's a problem there. I think all of us need to grow and change on something. But we do that through being exposed to people who are different than we are. So this is true for the individual company. If we're paying attention to diversity and really trying to bring in people with different backgrounds, different thoughts, different upbringings, et cetera, it's going to allow our company to do better. So I'm not an expert in this, but I do know that it's something that we have to be committed to, that we at least want to try to be able to create these opportunities for people with different backgrounds to come to the table and have a voice at that table. Now, from the sense of belonging, this also comes back to the fact of everything that I talk about, in the fact that, people need to be seen, which means we need to take the time to listen. If somebody has a bad idea, we don't belittle them. I always say, there are no dumb ideas, because a dumb idea could spark something that over time becomes a great idea. And we have historical, proof of that over and over again. However, the only way we're going to be able to have belonging is if people take the time to remember that anytime you deal with other human beings, and we're doing this in our companies all day long, other carbon-based life form, the people on the other side of that relationship have their own stuff, and we don't know what it is. People have their own backgrounds, their own struggles. Maybe they're dealing with aging parents. Maybe they're dealing with a financial thing. Maybe it's something health-wise. And we don't know because we don't take the time to listen and see and hear and give a safe space for people to talk about who they are and what they're going through. So if we go into it realizing I have my worldview and I have my experiences and my stuff, good stuff and bad stuff, but so do you. And we take the time to really let people share what they want. We don't make them share things they don't want to share, but we let people share the parts of them that they want to share and that they need to share. All of a sudden, if they feel seen and heard, that's the first step to feeling like there's belonging. And so we need to get back to realizing that we can't have people living in silos. The people who come to work for us actually bring all parts of their lives with them. And we need to be able to let that be okay. And we need to be accepting that somebody may have different lifestyle choices than we do. And that's awesome. People may have different religious backgrounds than we do. That's awesome. In the workplace, we come together and take those things and work for a common cause with each other, not against each other. And that's when we're going to thrive.
The leaders don't know, hey, where should I start? Like, start somewhere, and you learn as you do, and really invest efforts. And it's never too late to really invest your efforts within DI space. Like when I look at my company, for example, right? It's I'm really fortunate to be part of a company which is so diverse in that sense. Like right now, when I look at even customers, right? We serve customers across 30 markets who can send money to 170 plus countries across the globe. So the diversity of the customers that we are serving is so much that if we don't actually value diversity, then what are we building essentially, right? So that's one. But more importantly, I think where you can start to really think about is within your DEI efforts, like engage with your employees, listen to them, right? And I think like a lot of companies, do these employee engagement surveys, like really have authentic surveys done and listen to them, read the comments, have the pulse of your organization, and that tells you a lot around how people who are especially diverse, like really thinking about feel about some of the decisions that have been made throughout. And then the last point I would say is, like, from a culture perspective, one example I'll give, which I really love, what we did, we introduced something called a thinking environment in our meeting culture. And what it does is, like, how our meetings start is, let's say we have 10 people across the room or in the Zoom. We are ensuring, that each and every person within that has a chance to speak, and it has almost an equal chance to speak, right? And what that means is we do it across all the different meetings that we have to ensure that everybody who has everybody in the meeting or in a group has a viewpoint that we need to listen to, and they bring a different perspective. Because a lot of times that happens is that people don't, ultimately it's about like listening to different perspective and investing in these small changes within your, how you run the company, different cultural aspects within your company, how you treat your employees, and across the life cycle, whether it's from hiring, for example, like, especially the tech side, like as you mentioned, like we have to be really intentional about our pipeline, how the candidates are coming towards the pipeline, and being really intentional about how do you introduce and further encourage diversity within that. And I think it takes an effort. Tracking the metrics around DEI is so important. And there are metrics that exist across, how many people of within different breakdown of DEI angles are you hiring, or are you promoting, or are performing well, or even people who are leaving. And measuring, monitoring, and being intentional about it goes a long way. And ultimately, that's a cycle. You learn around that, and as you learn, you get better and you innovate. And it goes back to the point. Tech is about innovation. Innovation cannot be done without bringing in different perspectives and diverse perspectives.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think what you said about measuring is really important, because you can't improve what you can't define, right? And you can't define something without measuring it. So I think that's really important. And the point you made about speed of innovation as well, again, study after study has shown that speed of innovation improves the more diverse your workforce is. So I think those are really good points. Well, I think you've both given a ton of great advice and insights today, and I want to thank you both for your time. Appreciate being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
If you liked what you heard on today's podcast, please subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and please share this content with your peers on your social media channels and in other ways that it'll reach as many people as possible. Our goal is to help more founders achieve success more quickly, and the best way to do that is by sharing our collective knowledge. A rising tide lifts all boats, and the more the WTIA tech community can help and support one another, the better.